Good evening. We are at 6 p.m. in Bulgaria and we have a visitor from Toronto. Naila is a very senior change manager in the city of Toronto and she's going to share with us a lot of from her experience. But when we talked about leadership, it turned out that it's all a game of pivots. So, Naila, it's on to you. Please, let's go with your presentation.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much. Like good evening, good night. My time here is 11 a.m. So early, like quite of early in the day here in Toronto. Very pleased to be here. So very excited to be in this conference. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Thank you so much, Levin. I know you guys have been working for months in the background, and it looks like it's an amazing event. I've heard a few of the speaker, and I think it was energizing, very warming, lots of learning and growth. And thanks for all that. So uh, I will be showing a couple of videos. I'll be also having some polls. So guys, if you have your smartphone, so keep them ready. We will do some word cloud kind of question and then and share some ideas. And it's mainly about discussions. It's mainly about having some conversations. You as my colleagues and you as my partner. So absolutely not an expert teach piece why I'm here. It's more about let's talk about these things, especially given the time we are in, like the COVID situation and really unparalleled time in the history of at least my lifespan. And how do we pivot? How do we move forward from here? So we have all the negative and dark aspects. We have seen people losing their jobs, like affected lives and health, economy all over the world. But also, I think this has been amazing for individuals, for some businesses who took it as an opportunity to think out of the box, to be creative, to be bold, and really come up with some solutions to fill those gaps in the markets. And that's what I'm talking about personally. I took lots of advantage of this home kind of remote working. During COVID, I did two things which I've never done in my life. I started recording my videos, coming on Zoom and putting me out there, which was a very courageous act on my part. But I think COVID pushed me to do that, and business grew, and the projects I was doing landed in successfully as well. And the other piece was my backyard, which used to be just a junk. We would never open the curtains, and it turned out into a beautiful garden. And these days, in snow and Christmas spirit and holiday spirit, like there are a lot of lights. And so I had the opportunity to actually do two things, like pivoted my life towards those two directions. And it was absolutely new growth and new learning, and also new earning to some extent as well. So let's get into that. And before I go, I think something is very topical. And I know, Levent, you don't like this guy. I truly love this guy. Let's guys, let me know if you could hear and tell me which movie is this and who is this actor. All right, so let's stop there. And yeah, in the chat, head on to the chat. And who could recall which movie is this? Anyone in the chat, head on to the chat. Anyone have watched this movie? All right, so it's No Time to Die. James Bond, just recent movie, and then we'll chat about what's the purpose showing this. Let's look at this. What's happening here? Special Agent John Hartley, FBI. All right, so who could guess? Levin, you said you saw this movie. Which one is this one?
The Red Notice, I just saw it like 3 days ago.
You saw it 3 days ago, right? And yeah, so what's the difference between these two? What was the purpose showing? I'm a big James Bond fan. I always watch the movie each time Daniel Craig's movie come out, at least two or three times. Yeah, sounds crazy, really. My kids make fun of me. IMAX, and I go to different theaters and really see how the movie looks like. And I went this time again. I was waiting for this movie for past 5 years. Whoever is James Bond fans, they know. But it was surprisingly quiet in the cinema. The first time I went, there was only 5 or 6 people in the hall, and the second time I was the only one. And after a while, like another couple came. So somehow, like there were many other factors the why movie did not do very well, and some critics are calling it disappointment in terms of financial gains compared to all his other movies. It's because the the core audience who come to watch James Bond, they are like now middle-aged kind of people who really avoided, still due to COVID, going out and mixing up with the crowds and really exposing themselves. But whereas on the other hand, Network's Red Notice has been a blockbuster. I watched the movie. I think the humor and the action was for me very superficial. I know my friend Levent liked it a lot, but still, this has been a blockbuster. So where was the gap which Netflix just captured? And I know that an argument could go that it's not just new; they have been capturing and filling that gap for long. But in terms of movies, I see more and more Netflix kind of taking the role of that cinema kind of goers kind of audience. They attracting them in, and I meet everybody who has read Notice Watch. Like every now and then, everyone says that. Whereas James Bond, I think very few people I met who would have gone to the theaters and watched the movie. So that's the big pivoting kind of example for us, and that's where I'm going with my talk. That how some companies are making this strategic move. They're finding that gap. They're coming up with solutions and filling that gap. But is this the same as it happened before, or is this the same as it will happen in the future? Like, really, really looking at it, what is that unparalleled situation which we are in, and which kind of pivot most of the larger companies are doing. So, how to pivot? Like, if we talk about pivot, the word pivot, my initial understanding was that it's a slight move. Like the analogy comes from basketball, the little pivot they do, and
Naila,
kind of the
Naila,
body
sorry
shifted.
to interrupt, but I have just felt lost. Meaning, I remember the days I was watching Lost, and every episode there was a pivot. Do you remember?
Yeah, yeah,
That's also an interesting story where pivot becomes the normal. I think we should watch Lost again.
yeah. So you're saying that pivot becomes normal? Is
Well,
this?
yes, in Lost, basically, at some point, there were so many twists and revelations. The revelation, I mean, the twist became the normal plot, you know? So you would expect in every episode something new to happen, and you wouldn't. Actually, it was the first time, I believe, they played with the plot so many times that I think it became a new normal for filmmaking. This is probably it was accepted as the first domination of series over the screen, you know, the silver screen, cinemas.
Yeah,
I believe Lost was the first success story, and exactly because of that, the people who were watching it over a very extended period of time, they were captivated by the twists. And it's very interesting that I forgot about it, but actually it was one of the first successful series before even Netflix came to dominate the market.
yeah, and you touch on a very important point. That's my next slide as well. That pivots are not new, right? I know during COVID, people have been talking a lot about pivot. To be honest, I investigated a lot the word, and I see a lot of literature, Harvard Review, business reviews, and everyone is talking about pivoting way more than I ever heard like 5 or 6 years ago. And my first understanding was, all right, now it's COVID, it's unparalleled, never happened before. But it's not, you're right. Like every business who survived from 1900s onward, they pivoted and shifted many times. Like it was the norm, but we never used it this much before. Now, I think it has become more obvious that this is going to be the new norm. You're right. Like every stage you have to pivot. So some of the companies which I did some research, and there is so much research out there, that they pivoted and their success was like staggering, like shocking stress. We all know the story of Nintendo, like again, like $1 billion industry. The whole console of Nintendo is very much like still my son uses, and he's the big buyer of all this. But if you look at from 1900s on, when Nintendo from the card selling company moved on to become at some stage taxi service. At some stage, then they became get into hotel industry, and then all the Mario and the Game Boys, and now it's really pivoted many times, and not just a little shift, which I initially thought pivoting is a little shift, but they just changed 180-degree. All their offering really changed. Starbucks, same story, like when Howard Schultz, from selling beans and selling machines, and they started brewing their own coffee, really changed the business model, business structure. And Twitter, like, it was very interesting to read the entire story and the background, that how from being a podcasting platform, it changed to like what it is. And there is still talk about these days that they will do another shift, another pivot. And the best one is YouTube, right? How they launched it on Valentine's Day. It was supposed to be a dating site, and from there onward, like, it has really revolutionized the world companies do business, and we live our
And
life.
Naila, how do we explain the, let's say, the consumers' choices like this? I'm thinking of these birds, you know, the bird flocks that are moving all the time. Let's call it fashion. Obviously, there's a global market when it comes to digital. It's a very big market, 6 billion potentially, everybody who's using internet. But do you see, for example, Starbucks being connected to that, or is there maybe Starbucks is the regular, let's say, franchise model. Let's say let's call it capitalism. But
Yeah.
when you say pivot in this context, I think the market is obviously favoring and certain. We talked about winners actually. Some software companies became winners, some others
Yeah.
became losers. So in the sense that this new normal maybe is fitting better some certain types of products and consumption.
Yeah, like, I know some of these examples are like very certain type of products, and even when I was researching, lots and lots were tech examples as well. But on the other hand, you could see Airbnb, like, just really not tech at all, like Uber Eats, not tech at all. I see that there is a lot of need in any business. You just need to find that gap. You just need to fill that gap. And as I was talking about my gardening, I've never been a gardener, but I did some classes last year, like how do you make your small garden into the pots kind of gardening. And I did not expect that I would get people who would be interested to know that, and I could kind of expand it. That was really something I never even thought. So I know that some examples which come to our mind immediately because they made like this hell of success, but there are so many other examples in very non-traditional businesses and in very non-traditional organization where pivoting really helped them. And then even look at this online learning kind of platforms. I have a learning and leadership background, and I kind of open my eyes and ears to see that online training and learning will become the third largest consumer kind of a business, where people really consume all that information. And as you were saying that education and learning does not need to be like you talked about democratizing that. So that's what it does. It really allows people all those choices and to experience. So there are many non-traditional examples. I just picked one which really inspired me a lot, like day in and day out, and we live our lives in these companies.
Well,
So
if you talk about the case of retail, for example, retail industry is a bit like the digital, in the sense
yeah,
that
yeah,
digital is the ultimate proximity. You know, it's very convenient. It's very it brings the service to you, and I think the retail concept was the same. We have a retail industry. It's just because it brings us the convenience of finding everything in one place. So in a way, I would say internet. For example, we saw during COVID times how many new e-commerce startups were invested in billions. I think there's a Turkish one actually who really received a very large amount of like billions in investment. Also, the all the services of delivery, they became like crazy because, well, I think this is not just a pivot, but it's a shift in the market, and which causes a big pivot within the company.
yeah, yeah. And And of course, company would reflect whatever is going in the market, right? And the same example, I originally have come from Pakistan, and uh, they did like Amazon, similar to Amazon, they created their own platform, theraz.com. It raised millions and millions of dollars. It was totally unheard that from local villages and local towns, women-led little businesses could be really showcased on the global platform. So I think it's both. It's the market. It also reflects what people need, and it also kind of, I think, COVID pushed it towards that. Uh, COVID really played a key role there, where people kind of moved forward and really took that action. But what where I wanted us to stop all those examples, where I wanted to kind of talk about that pivot is not new, and these companies pivot, and as you said, like the market need and the company need and consumers needs all combined together, changes are bound to take place. But where I am more going with all this, that companies are now looking into, and I think with the previous speaker, you touched on that a little bit, Levin, that what is the priority now? Like, are companies inventing and reinventing their products, or they are working towards becoming more tech, or are they changing the shape and look and feel of their offering,
It's
or
it's
what else they are prioritizing to pivot? And that's where I'm focusing. What matters the most to all stakeholders in the post COVID world? And I also came across new terminology. It's being called now PC world. So let's call it in the PC world, where the big shifts are happening, and some of them I'm observing in my own experience. So these five companies I googled. I have given the little link there as well. Uh, you can all indulge in whenever you want. You have time to look forward to more information. So Microsoft, Ford, City, Google, and Infosys. So I was looking at their plans. I was looking at their strategy during COVID, and now what are they planning to do post COVID. So one big thing was very crystal clear to me, and which I really like to talk a lot about, that strategic shift which these companies are taking. Of course, is a strategic move for them, right? Uh, but it's not in that typical kind of dimension which Levent and I are talking about. It's not what examples we gave. Our reality is going to be a little bit different, and the strategic move is now in a different dimension. At least my research about five of those big companies which we just saw. So I'll pause a little bit and I'll like let you think. If it's not about the product, it's not about how the service orientation would change, not the tangibles. So, what are the strategic shifts you think that these companies are investing? Just any wild ideas. Like, I'll pause it here a little bit. I'll welcome type in the chat if that option is available to
it
everybody.
is
If
available,
not,
and if you see any chat or questions, we can transmit them to you.
yeah,
I will keep an eye on this.
thanks. So
But
let's pause a little
but
bit. Let's review.
I can already speculate a few. Are they investing more in mobile, for example, like mobile first kind of strategies?
Okay, so this is what you're thinking, right? Yeah, okay, go ahead. More ideas. Anyone else?
If
Is
it,
Sylvia on the call? Can I pick on Sylvia? Like
well,
any
I
ideas?
can talk about Ford. I was working for Fiat this year,
Yeah.
and at some point they said we cannot find any more chips. There's a chip shortage, and they will not be able to fabricate new cars. At some point they had to stop. So this is not just
Hmm.
pivot, but it's a important kind of disruption. But of
Yeah.
course, Ford is a very large company, and maybe they have different types of pivots in different types of disruptions. City, well, I think financial industry has a lot of threats right now because they used to charge account holders for meaningless services, and now they cannot do that anymore because payments are becoming let's say frictionless and costless, and everybody's like talking about fintech that is disrupting the banking, but this is not even about the entire banking system, but actually how the digital transformation of anything that is related to purchasing customers, because whatever you do on internet, right, they have to go
Yeah,
through your bank account. So in a way, whatever disrupts, let's say, retail or online market must also have implications, and probably they must also think of how to address the new customers. I don't know if there's
yeah,
any
I know.
business
So
who figured out millennials yet. You know, we keep talking
yeah,
about it, but we haven't figured them out yet.
yeah, all great ideas, right? And that's where our minds naturally go. But um, they are all thinking what is actually very big on their mind right now is that um, should we go remote or not? I think that's the consistent theme. Like the top one is about people. As you could see, like 20% of Americans work from home pre-COVID, and during COVID it became 71%. I think again there are some numbers. Um, the the evidence is in that website. Go and look for it. And when we talk about 54% want to work from home in the post-COVID world, and other companies are going 100% hybrid or remote work. For example, Shopify, Upwork, and Drift. So it's surprising that other than all those things, Levan, you were mentioning, like going mobile and digital and millennials and looking at tapping into all those areas and markets, the chips and all those things. But I think where all those companies are consistently looking at is the people side of all this. So they're looking at what matters the most right now is their people, and looking at this data is I was also looking at, is remote work more productive or not? So lots of numbers go in all those companies' website. They actually supporting their decision of remote work by having the remote work surveys done and interviewing stakeholders. And I would kind of pause here and I pick on your brain that what do you think? Like, do you think remote work is more productive, pivoting in that direction as leaders or as managers or as company owners? What do we see that? Is there any hope for more productivity, or in the post-COVID world, we wouldn't be able to sustain it?
Uh,
So let's just open up for a poll and see what is your thinking.
there are more people who said yes than no, but there are even more people who said depends.
Yeah, yeah. So we're not sure, right? But these five companies, which I'm bringing the research forward, consistently their surveys prove the that remote work is productive. So there are many surveys from there are surveys from Harvard and Stanford. The same website gives us lots of those survey results. I just copied one, Great Place to Work, where you could see the red curve is after 2019, the post-COVID, when we kind of settled into our remote work, and the bottom one is when we really pushed to do the remote work. So you could see the trend is really high. So production is higher. So in a nutshell, what we're trying to say here that these companies pivoted to really see where people are more comfortable, really see where employees wants and preferences are. So they actually did not at that time considered the remote productivity data, and they're not even considering now. The decision they are making is purely listening to their people, is purely listening to what people want, and they are making those changes and making those decisions. We know Google already decided the hybrid model, like even post COVID. So coming back to what are the pivots, what are the priorities which affect all stakeholders? So what come common in all these five organizations in those four areas? So the top one is employees facing conflicted priorities, and companies are pivoting to sustain performance. The first one is they understood that during COVID, people are facing conflicted priorities, their families, their homes, they taking care of elderly, like stay home women who work. They also have like homeschooling kids. So in that situation, these companies decided to sustain performance. It's very, very important that they should find a balance. They should provide all that support to their employees. So those conflicted priorities should not take over their work or their energy or their productivity. So somehow they supported their workforce in a way, either timings or flexibility, using equipments. I know when I was working here for the city of Toronto, we were allowed to bring in anything. Like some of my colleagues who refused to work from their dining table, they actually brought in big trucks and took the entire office desk with them, chairs, double screen, triple monitors, whatever your need is. We were allowed to take it to really make that adjustment to our new lifestyle. Point two is about workplace culture. So 32% of the organizations are these organizations are replacing full-time employees with contingent workforce. So what are the implications of this? So not only on the work practices but also the culture changes. They bring people on contract, they bring people who are not full-time permanent employees. Yes, that creates some job security issues. Yes, but at the same time, it really changes the whole environment, the whole atmosphere, the whole cultural kind of stories, symbols, and systems which we support our employees with, just because of this factor that they're open to have contingent workforces. The third piece is from the top directive, and that's very, very important for me. So, working with leaders, working with presidents of the companies and CEOs. So, I see that there is more emphasis and more openness bringing in the president or bringing in the regional CEO to a town hall or to a call, which really addresses issues like diversity, addresses issues like equity within the COVID world, issues about what employees are facing through, what mothers are facing through. We did a survey, and some of the women wanted not to do any meeting between 3 to 4 p.m. because that's the time kids from school come home and it's time they pulled in many directions. Likewise, some people did not wanted the meetings when kids are families having breakfast and they are feeding their elderly, and it was I've never seen that before, but where our leaders, our top executives are open, vulnerable, talking and sharing their own experiences, what's happening in the home. Even at some stages, people shared videos at the top level, which really built that atmosphere of trust and atmosphere of safety and atmosphere where you could share and you're not being judged. And the fourth pivot, which I see, yes, the research, but also see in real life organization, that employers have become now social and mental health kind of providers, a safety net in a bigger way than it was before. So we all know that due to COVID, people have suffered, like larger numbers have suffered depression and anxiety, loneliness, isolation. People have suffered secretly in their own kind of little world because we couldn't keep in touch with others. And there is more and more need for organization to really come in and fill that gap. So I know we talked about organization like Nintendo, organizations like YouTube, where they came in and they filled in that technological kind of gap where they came in and really did their job. But these days I see the best organizations, what they're doing, they're filling gap in kind of human investment where people need people, and leaders are really stepping up and they're becoming peer-to-peer coaches, they're becoming mentors, they're talking about mental health openly, people are talking about diversity issues openly, people are talking about women issues openly, which is unprecedented. I've never seen this before, and I think those pivots are going to last longer even after COVID is over, right? I don't know. I can't tell. Will we become 100% remote or hybrid or remote combination? But what I feel that these four pivots, where people have become the real core kind of value for the organization, is never going to go back. Where leaders have really stepped up and took care of their people, they have become that safety net provider for people, is the biggest ever pivot. Because what does that do? That really determines that how productive an organization could be. If people are really happy, they are in good positive mental state, the agility and invention and all that creativity has to happen.
I
And if you take that away, because you're not really stepping in as a leader. You're not stepping in as a leadership organization. You're really addressing people's core needs. You're not pivoting in that direction. So that creativity, that boldness, that beauty in new production or new ideas and new creative kind of solutions is not going to happen.
Naila, I have a comment.
Yeah.
At least in my case, I've been, let's say, working and let's say behaving as I am right now for maybe 15 years. So in a way, for me, the current way of working was the standard. In that sense, but I noticed something. In the first year of COVID, I think it was like more like a stop. Everybody was stopped and expecting something to change, hoping that it wouldn't last. But what I saw is a lot of decisions were delayed, and a lot of things came to a halt for companies, for individuals, for schools, many things. But this year, what I see is a push. I think the first year was like lost time, and I think a lot of organizations they didn't want to adapt real fast. Maybe only some of
Yeah.
them did. But now what I see is that actually there's a landslide. Everybody has accepted, and I believe all the decisions have. I think the real pivot. This is called a tipping point, right? There's a tipping point where, at some point, all the accumulation of so many indecisions increases the potential of having to make one. Maybe this also happens for project managers. Imagine you got budget for a project, the PC world has arrived, you kept it delaying for 6 months, but then suddenly you say, okay, how can I spend this because the end of the year is coming? And then just in terms of releasing anything that was blocked, there was some kind of a discharge that happened like, I would say maybe 7-8 months ago, last September or something like that. Since then, I see
Yeah.
that maybe we are in a second phase where, having accepted it, I think the adaptive decisions and moving forward kind of mentality is starting. Even things won't change. So that 54%, maybe it is some kind of a ratio of acceptance. Maybe the remaining 46 haven't yet accepted. So if they accept it, maybe the ratio could be much higher.
Yeah, yeah, and we will always have people who will never accept, right? There are always people who don't believe in the productivity of all this, and that's fine. But if the majority is moving in a direction, and especially the direction which I'm mentioning in terms of where we're really paying attention to people, not just the project, because behind every project there are people, and project managers are people themselves, like their own personal well-being and their own personal mental health is extremely important, because we all can get lonely. I know what you're saying. Even I have worked remotely with my career with Rogers Telecommunication, absolutely like hybrid model, but it was optional, right? So it was not forced the way we were forced, like first part of the COVID, and then you have a choice. And it is human nature, when things are forced, they become tough, and you become depressed, right? So, but then I think there have been many things which happen. Many good things happen where people got out of that depression. Like they really learned how to link and how to learn collaboratively online. And I feel like the Zoom room or WebEx has become my literal lounge room, right? I would do one group and then the other group, and I built lots of global associations in the past few years. Imagine, like, I'm in Toronto. I never knew someone from Bulgaria will get in touch with me, and I'll be talking about all this. So, yes,
Well,
I
it's
think
actually it just got easier. But you see, I've been in like a call center kind of business 15 years ago. You know, we
that
install
was the norm, right?
we
Yeah,
installed Skype. I remember installing Skype in a call center. This was like 15 years ago. You know, here in
yeah,
Bulgaria. So since 15 years, so much has changed. The level has changed. What people do has changed. The companies, there's more and more. But what I see is that, let's say, the world is evolving every decade. Every decade, almost everything changes. You basically see a layer of the old world. On top of that, you see a new world that is coming out like a garden, you know. So in that sense, I also see that there will be some pullback because this created new offices, it created new cities, you know, new business parks, and now we are wondering if the business park empty, how will that survive? I think the real question right now is the third phase. Do you think in the third phase will there be, let's say, big bankruptcies, big bailouts? Will the government still be in place? You know, it's a bit of a zombie apocalypse also that we have to, you know, consider
Yeah,
as a
but
scenario.
I know, but again, like I think my mind goes back to where I'm not afraid, right? I think that um, whoever will fill the gap, like that particular gap, will survive. For example, we know like how many restaurant, like we know that restaurant industry, hospitality industry is affected a lot. We know that, right?
Yep.
Many restaurants in my area are shut down, but at the same time, there is a full chain of restaurants in my area which is open. Their offering is very different. Like they cater for people who are coming from home. The price point is different, very vegan, very vegetarian kind of lifestyle, and I they are like so busy. So you could see that someone else came in and they fill that gap. Still, hospitality industry, still where rest of the other restaurants are being shut down, someone is still really thriving. So that will continue. That's I think the way life is, and that the way businesses are, the way humans thrive and really grow. So with that, I would like to pause here a little bit, and I have a few questions for all of us. My first question is, what shifts have you observed in your work? The second one is, how have you pivoted personally? You can think about work, you can think about your own, for example, fitness or cooking or gardening, or you have adapted like walking every day or whatever you have done. Maybe learn a new language, new coding, something else which you did for yourself. And then the question is, how can we sustain it? Like both, you can answer this as an organization, as a project manager, or as a person who really took that pivot. And then we answered the following question. So to do this, I wanted to do a Mentimeter with you, and I wanted to share the QR code with that. Just bear with me a moment. Levant, you still there?
Yes, yes, I'm looking at your
Yeah.
screen. How can we sustain
Well,
it?
yeah, that's fine. Thanks. So three questions, and just give me a moment.
So what shifts have you observed at your work? How did you pivot personally at a
Yeah.
personal level? Is this sustainable?
Yeah. So this is the Mentimeter QR code. If you can all log in through your smartphones, I think you can do it through your laptop as well. The QR code, and this is the Mentimeter. And then once you are logged in, then I'll bring the screen up where we have these questions. Levent, if you log in into your phone, so then I would know like how long it's taking to everyone else.
I cannot log in with my phone because my team has my phone. Thousands of people are writing to me. Where is my ticket? Let me see if I can. 20.
Anyone else who could confirm that they're able to log in?
Yes, but we should be able to share this. Is it? Let me see if I can share it with everyone. CF.
We could share the link in the
Could you
chat.
read me the numbers? 27 CFV
CFV 8I3PU.
3BU
I may um, do the PowerPoint.
PU.
I bring it up here and copy the link in the chat. How's that?
Okay, I will share this in the chat now in
Yeah.
Huva,
So
so people.
I've shared it in the chat as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I would bring the
So the first question I see is how can we sustain it?
just 1 second.
And we need to enter a word.
You could enter a sentence. That's fine.
All right. So, do you see some
Just one
results? I
second.
entered my suggestions.
You entered yours, yeah. Just 1 second. So you able to see my screen?
Yep. But this question I didn't see. It was directly
Oh, it took
how
you
to
to just
sustain
one
it
second.
as a question.
Yeah. Okay. Let me bring it back. All right. Question 1 on 1. All right. You should be able to see this question. What shift have you observed in your work? Is this? Could you see the screen as well?
No, but yes, but the question I see again is how can we sustain it? I don't see this question.
Yeah. All right. So let's not waste time on this. I think something went wrong on my side. I apologize for that. Let's go back to our questions.
No problem. If
Let
anybody has suggestion, I put like in the chat.
Yeah.
Spend
Let's discuss in the chat
more time
and talk
learning, for
about it.
example,
Yeah.
and give more time to others, but virtually. This is my answer to the sustaining. Basically, we need to use this time for benefit for ourselves and for others. I think this is an opportunity. We are losing less time in commuting, for example. We don't need to for every let's say meeting. I don't see why people have to travel so far. We can always have a virtual meeting, right?
But how do we the- so you about you, Levent? Okay, let's go back to the first question. You did not shift much because you already have worked this way, right?
For me, the pivot that we're talking about wasn't a pivot. That's how I always work. So it
Yeah.
is true that I see less people. I see less with my eyes or I touch less, but actually I'm in contact with more people. So the communication has increased, even though
Mm-hmm.
we don't see each other that often, but then we spend more time together online.
Yeah. So anyone else have any other shift they have either did or they either have seen or they were
I'm waiting for any. Sylvia, what do you think? Can you type something in the chat, in the Q&A? In the chat, sorry. Did somebody answer? So it looks like we don't have a lot of people. It's almost closing time. So I think maybe we can conclude the kind of
yeah.
conclusion that you have.
So I'm just concluding
Actually,
the final
most
part.
people say there is better time management in the sense of managing the shift. Lubomira, thank you so much for your answer.
Yeah. So let's conclude this. Let's conclude our final thoughts that end of the day, what is priority for organizations is people. What is priority for us as project managers, as human beings, as managers of who are leading transformations. Um, it's the stakeholder, the consumer, or the end user on the other end is a human, and many organizations are making a shift in that direction where people are being valued, and which is a great shift. I think that pivot is going to last post COVID. And if you have seen that, that's great. If you have not seen that, maybe influence towards that direction.
Uh,
So with that end in mind, let's commit to at least one shift which you think that
we have
you
Ralitza from our
yeah.
audience who has a very good comment that this is actually a good time to develop our empathy skills. And she says that now teams are fighting less and they like each other more. Maybe they try to do something nice for each other. So if you cannot see it, Ralitza, your comment, is it because there's more empathy because there's less jealousy, less fight, or I'm joking. So basically, the empathy part is that why? Because we are distant socially. I think we have to compensate, and this is a good chance to be actually nice with each other.
Yeah, and I think it's a collective depression or whatever situation we're all in. So that really builds in the more empathy, but also resilience as well, right? How we all emerged through the first 6 months, and the second 6 months, we were all good with that. And now we are trying to shift and change and keeping some of the good things which COVID
I,
gave us and
I
coming
have
up with
I have
something
one
new.
more comment. I forgot about
Yeah.
this. I read. I think it was you who said in our conversation the first time, and you didn't mention this time, is that people slept more. I think
Oh,
that
yeah,
could
that's
be
my favorite one. Yeah.
that could be a very
Um,
interesting change.
absolutely.
Even
Yeah.
though we work more, even though let's say maybe we are watching too much Netflix. What is very interesting is that not only that we have more time because we don't commute, but maybe we have more time to sleep in the morning, for example. So instead of taking your car, going to office, you could be sleeping better.
Yeah,
What do
so
you
it's
think,
Dr.
Lubomira,
Matthew.
Ralitsa? How
Absolutely.
did
Yeah.
your sleeping change? Because I have one colleague actually who was suffering from insomnia, and during that period, what she did was, and she's a project manager, by the way. If you are in the audience, hello. She knows who I am. Basically, it's because she had to deal with the situation and do many things, but she couldn't move, so she was stuck at home, and actually that created a certain pattern of insomnia. But I have to give her credit; she actually used it to participate in some kind of a COVID research project. So she was working very late. Yeah, Seville, thank you. I think this is very interesting. I wonder if we could not become nicer people, and because we slept better. When you call your team first thing in the morning, you actually feel like, oh, I'm so happy to see you.
Yeah, because your mood, right? Your mood is determined with the sleep you have, and that's Dr. Matthew Walker's very famous. Look up Dr. Matthew Walker. He's a sleep scientist and based in the States, a British researcher, did a lot of work. And during COVID, they were very happy because they talk about sleep deprivation, but people slept more. I think that's my another graph for another presentation. You're right. Thanks for pointing out. So yeah, and that's one shift which I think it helped me as well a lot because I suffer from broken sleep, and just the fact that I don't need to wake up at 5:30 to catch up my 7:30 train, it really gave me 2 hours more sleep, and that really affected everything.
I think it depends
So
on the number of children, because Ralitsa from the audience says, yes, I spend more time with my kids, but I can't say I sleep more, as I have to work and compensate for the time taking care of the kids. So this is
absolutely, yeah.
that was another trend that I spotted, is that people actually are easier to reject a job or entirely quit their job because they cannot actually find somebody to take care of their nanny time. So maybe the babysitting job has suffered a lot. Maybe babysitting is not possible anymore. That's also a very interesting thing, because that's an industry by itself. Anyways, we have only 1 minute left.
Yeah,
So,
and I think women suffered. There's another data as well, which we speak in women conferences, because they have been doing lots of work, more added work other than their normal work. They suffered more during COVID because of all those things: kids homeschooling, elderly parents, and then the normal job. And that's a fact.
okay, Naila, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me once again, Sylvia, and once again, Levin. Thanks a lot. Good night, guys. I have to start my day. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
All the best, and have a great and worry less, please. You seem to be the
Thank you.
worrying type.
No, I'm okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Have a great day. Bye, Naila.
Bye bye.